My mother left me critically injured in the ER so she could finish a spa appointment. She said, "I'm busy. If she dies, call me." 20 days later, I woke up with a completely different legal guardian. When I was 18, I was in a serious accident on Interstate 45 while driving home from a big Easter family gathering in Charleston. Doctors explained that without emergency surgery within an hour, I wouldn't make it. That same afternoon, my mother and younger sister were relaxing at an upscale spa. When the hospital put her on speaker, my mother said, "If she doesn't make it, tell me later. We're in the middle of a treatment and I'm not signing anything right now." My name is Maya Johnson, and I'm 21 today. When I finally opened my eyes 20 days later, the chart at the end of my hospital bed had been quietly updated. My mother was no longer listed as my guardian. Someone else's name had replaced hers. If you want to know who actually stepped forward when my own mother didn't, hit the subscribe button. The story only becomes more unusual from here. My new guardian once told me, "If you've ever watched the people who should care for you walk away when you needed them most, comment below. I know I'm not the only one." Let me take you back to where everything began. I grew up just outside Charleston on James Island, in a large white mansion. I was 8 when my father died of leukemia. One week, he was teaching me to ride my bike in the driveway, and the next, he was gone. The only person who kept showing up every weekend after the funeral was my mom's father, John Marshall. He was a retired police chief, well known in the county, who never really stopped being one. He simply traded the badge for a porch swing and a fishing pole. I rode in the front seat of his old Ford truck while he told stories about chasing bootleggers through back roads. He'd bring shrimp and grits from his favorite spot on Shem Creek. I never called him Grandpa John. He was just Grandpa, the only adult who never disappeared. For more than a year after my dad's death, my mother, Rebecca Turner, stayed in deep grief. Then, at a charity event downtown, she met Ethan Cooper. Ethan drove a black Range Rover that always smelled like new leather and owned half of a new development on Kiowa Island. I barely remember their beachside wedding 2 years later. 9 months after that, Lily was born, blonde, energetic, and instantly the center of everyone's attention. Overnight, the house had a nanny, a nursery, and a long list of new rules. To give Lily the larger room with the balcony, my bedroom was moved to a small corner space above the garage. My soccer medals were stored away in boxes. My mother started referring to me as my older daughter, as if I didn't really belong in my own home. By the time I turned 14, I felt almost invisible. Ethan ignored me unless I happened to be in his way. Still, he financed everything. Lily got new outfits every season, while I received uniforms for a private school I didn't even attend. Grandpa's modest brick house in West Ashley, about 30 minutes across the Ravenel Bridge, was the only place where I felt welcome. He kept the freezer stocked with popsicles, stored my old bike in his garage, and never once asked why I spent every spare weekend there. When I was 18, Easter weekend was supposed to be different. Grandpa held his annual barbecue, deviled eggs, sweet tea in mason jars, low country boil, and long tables under the live oaks. Cousins I hadn't seen in years flew in. Kids ran around, music played, and the air smelled like charcoal. Grandpa said the pale yellow dress he'd bought me matched my eyes, so I wore it. For a few hours, it felt like the past, like I might still belong somewhere. But near the dessert table, I overheard my mother on the phone. She told someone that she and Lily had a mother-daughter spa day planned for the next morning. She laughed while listing massages, facials, the whole package. After that, the three of them, her, Ethan, and Lily, were flying to the Bahamas for spring break. She mentioned my name only briefly. I felt the banana pudding in my hands go cold. I told Grandpa I needed to leave early because of a headache. He tried to convince me to stay, but I could tell he was struggling. All I wanted was to leave. He had helped me buy a 2002 Jeep Wrangler with the money I earned as a summer lifeguard, and he handed me the keys. "Drive safe, baby girl. Text me when you get home." By the time I reached I-45 westbound, it was getting dark. As often happens under the low-country sky, a spring storm rolled in fast, turning everything green with sheets of rain. Even with the wipers at full speed, visibility was terrible. Traffic slowed. To stay awake, I turned up the radio, one of Grandpa's favorite country songs. Headlights blurred into long streaks of red and white. I didn't notice the trail. At roughly 60 miles per hour, the truck driver jackknifed across 3 lanes, hydroplaned, and hit the driver's side of my Jeep. The metal twisted, the glass shattered, and the vehicle flipped twice before landing upside down against the median with the roof collapsing inward. I remember a sudden silence, the taste of blood, the seatbelt digging into my shoulder, and then everything went dark. I heard faint sirens before losing consciousness again. The Musk Emergency Department was chaotic. Doctors called out codes, and monitors urgently requested more O-negative blood. Voices kept shouting directions. I was rushed straight into Trauma Bay 1. Within moments, my clothes were cut away. Tubes were placed in my neck and needles in my arms. A surgeon, still in stained scrubs, explained that my pelvis was broken, my spleen had ruptured. I was bleeding in my skull, and I had less than an hour before the situation became irreversible. They needed parental consent to take me into surgery immediately. A kind nurse grabbed my phone, found my mother's contact, and hit FaceTime. After 3 rings, the call connected. I could hear spa music and massage chairs in the background. My mother appeared on the screen with cucumber slices on her eyes and a sheet mask still on. Lily was lying beside her, earbuds in, casually scrolling through TikTok. "Mrs. Cooper, this is Alvarez from MUSC Trauma," the nurse said. She angled the camera so my mother could see the ventilator tube and my blood-covered face. "Your daughter has been in a severe accident. She has critical injuries and needs immediate surgery. We need verbal consent now, or she may not make it through the next hour." Removing 1 cucumber slice, Rebecca squinted at the screen. Lily leaned in, took out an earbud, and stared. The doctor stepped closer to explain the situation again. Rebecca sighed, as though she'd been mildly inconvenienced. "Ma'am," the trauma physician said, "we're dealing with multiple fractures, internal bleeding, and possible brain swelling. We have to operate right away. If she doesn't survive, just call me afterward," my mother answered flatly. Lily let out a short laugh, stopped talking, and took a photo of my bruised face on the gurney. "We're in the middle of a treatment, and I'm not driving downtown to sign paperwork." Her thumbs moved across the screen. I later learned she sent the picture to her group chat with a caption she found amusing. The nurse's hands shook. She tried again to explain the urgency. A doctor behind her muttered, "Jesus Christ." Another whispered, "Make sure that's recorded." "Ma'am," the nurse repeated, "this is a legal requirement for a minor." "I heard you," Rebecca interrupted. "Call my father, John Marshall. He'll deal with it. We paid for a full-day package." Then she hung up. The trauma team stared at the blank screen. One resident looked ready to throw the phone across the room. The nurse scrolled to the next emergency contact. Grandpa. He was already driving as the call went through. He had been cleaning shrimp for the next day's dinner on his patio. Still wearing rubber boots and an apron stained with fish, he dropped everything the moment he heard the words, Maya and critical. The storm intensified as he sped across the Ashley River Bridge. Rain hammered the windshield. Lightning lit up the sky. And what was normally a 30-minute drive took him just 20 minutes. Soaked and still wearing the old badge he kept on his belt out of habit, he pushed through the emergency room doors. The charge nurse recognized him immediately and let him through. His hands shook so hard that the pen scratched the paper as he signed every consent form without reading a single line. He stayed in the bay long enough to see me covered in tubes, my face so swollen he barely recognized me. Leaning close to my ear, he whispered the same words he used when I woke up from nightmares as a kid. "I've got you, baby girl. Grandpa's right here." They moved me to the operating room immediately afterward. Outside the OR, he pulled a metal chair to the glass wall and sat. He didn't move for the next 10 hours, not when nurses offered him coffee, not when the waiting room emptied, not even when the storm knocked out the power and the backup generator kicked in for 14 minutes. Just before sunrise, he walked beside my bed as they transported me to the ICU, still holding the same cold hand that had stopped responding hours earlier. The next 20 days became the hardest of his life. The ICU smelled of antiseptic and anxiety. The machines hissed and beeped, reminding him constantly how fragile everything was. Grandpa refused to leave the vinyl recliner beside my bed. On the first night, nurses tried to send him home, but he simply handed them his old badge and said, "I'm not going anywhere." After that, no one questioned him. He slept in short stretches, boots still on, head tilted back. When awake, he talked to me in a low voice, so the machines wouldn't drown him out. He told me about the night I was born, how he held me first because my mother was too exhausted. He reminded me how I used to scream until he let me reel in my own fishing line, and how we caught a 6-foot shark off the Folly Beach Pier when I was 8. He read aloud from his worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, doing all the voices like he used to. On some nights, he hummed the old hymn his mother sang when he was young, the same one that always put me to sleep on his couch. Doctors came and went. One morning, the neurologist said the swelling in my brain had decreased. Another afternoon, the orthopedic surgeon warned that my pelvis might not heal correctly. Grandpa listened, nodded, asked direct questions that made the staff nervous, and then went right back to holding my hand. By day 18, the numbers finally shifted in the right direction. My blood pressure stabilized. The ventilator settings were reduced. A nurse reported seeing Grandpa smile for the first time in 3 weeks. That same day, a tall man in a navy suit appeared at the glass door. He leaned in and quietly said the red fish were biting, and we would go fishing once I woke up. 28 years earlier, Mr. Donovan had worked cases with Grandpa. They still played poker together once a month. Grandpa looked up at the folder in Donovan's hand and nodded slowly. No words needed. After leaving the hospital, Donovan got into a silver Lexus and drove straight to James Island. He already knew the address by heart. In the entryway, surrounded by expensive luggage, stood Rebecca and Lily. 2 matching pink suitcases with tags attached sat by the door, ready for a 7-night Royal Caribbean cruise, leaving Charleston Harbor the next morning. Ethan was upstairs on a work call for Instagram. Lily was recording a video of herself twirling in a new sundress. Rebecca was checking the passports again. The doorbell rang. Donovan introduced himself, handed Rebecca a large envelope, and watched as she opened it. Inside were 2 sets of documents: a civil claim from the hospital for extraordinary life-saving expenses along with pain and suffering, and an emergency petition to terminate parental rights for medical neglect of a minor. Lily, 14 at the time, had been an active participant in the rejection and was also listed as Rebecca Turner. Rebecca's spray tan faded to a pale color. Lily stopped mid-spin and ended her recording. "You have 80 hours to respond," Donovan said calmly. Rebecca immediately began ranting about lawyers, mistakes, and how anyone could question her parenting. She yelled, "After that, the judge has already approved an emergency hearing." Lily started crying, insisting her texts didn't mean anything. Donovan simply turned around and walked back to his car. Rebecca slid down the wall, clutching the papers, mascara running down her face. Lily kept shouting that her spring break was ruined. When Ethan came downstairs and saw the documents, he went pale. Back at the hospital, Grandpa never mentioned the visitor. He kept humming his usual hymn while holding my hand, waiting for me to wake up. 3 days later, I opened my eyes for the first time. Everything hurt. I tasted plastic and metal in my mouth. The machines still beeped, but quieter now. Grandpa's red-rimmed, unshaven face was the first thing I saw, and he was smiling so broadly I thought his cheeks might split. "Hey, baby girl," he said in a raspy voice. "Welcome back." I tried to say, but only a rough sound came out. He pressed the call button and lifted the whiteboard at the foot of the bed. Written in bold black letters were the words, "Legal Guardian, John Marshall." I stared until the words blurred. Tears slid into my ears. He wiped them away with his thumb, still faintly smelling of shrimp and salt air. Over the next few hours, he explained everything while doctors checked my eyes and nurses recorded vitals. He told me exactly what happened. My mother's words, the FaceTime call, Lily's screenshot, and how the paperwork was served while I was unconscious. He didn't soften anything. I cried again, harder this time. Not from pain, but from overwhelming relief that felt like the opposite of drowning. 3 weeks later, they let me go home. Not to James Island, but to Grandpa's small gray stilt house on Folly Beach, 20 minutes south of the city. When he carried me through the door, the sea air filled my lungs. His old fishing tackle room had become my bedroom. He had hung the same wind chimes we made when I was 9 and painted the walls a soft blue. Through the window, the ocean rolled on endlessly. Physical therapy started the next Monday. Grandpa treated me like I was 2 years old again as I relearned to sit up, stand, and eventually shuffle behind a walker. Because my wired jaw could only handle soft foods, he made shrimp and grits every night. We sat on the porch swing, with his arm around my shoulders, watching the sunset without needing to speak. One afternoon, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. My mother's name lit up the screen. I watched it ring 12 times. Grandpa stood quietly in the doorway, saying nothing. I pressed decline, set the phone down, and returned to the porch. She never tried to call again. That same week, across town, Ethan filed for divorce. His company had just received a major contract from the Port Authority, and he didn't want to be connected to headlines about abandoning a child. He left the James Island house with only his clothes and his golf clubs before the ink was dry. After 4 days of online outbursts, Lily went silent as college scholarship offers started arriving. Grandpa said nothing until I asked. When I finally did, he gave a direct answer. They made their choice, Ren. Now we make ours. On several nights, I woke up screaming from the pain. Grandpa often came in wearing an old police academy sweatshirt. He would shuffle into the room, sit on the edge of the bed, and hold my hand until the medication started working. Other nights, I woke to the sound of him praying in the living room. His voice strained as he asked God to give him enough years to see me fully recover. Once my stitches were removed and my casts were replaced with braces, I could walk the entire pier without stopping. Grandpa bought a bucket of shrimp and 2 fishing rods. We sat where the water turned deep green, and although we didn't catch much, it didn't matter. The last traces of hospital smell faded from my skin under the sun. One evening, as the wind blew my hair across my face, I looked toward the horizon and realized I had stopped waiting for apologies, explanations, or second chances. I had no interest in offering any either. The ocean kept moving, as it always did. A few months later, the day of the preliminary hearing arrived. Broad Street Courthouse smelled of polish and old wood. With Grandpa on one side and Donovan on the other, I entered using crutches. At the defendant's table sat my mother, wearing a navy suit 2 sizes too big, no makeup, and swollen eyes. Lily sat beside her in a private school blazer, staring at the floor. The judge, an older woman with steel gray hair, wasted no time. After adjusting her glasses, she told the bailiff to play the tape. On the large screen, the FaceTime call appeared. The gurney, my injured body, and spa music in the background. My mother's voice was cold and direct. If she doesn't make it, just call me when it's over. Lily's laugh followed. Then came the screenshot of my face covered in blood, along with Lily's caption. The courtroom fell silent. Someone in the back gasped. Next, Donovan placed the phone logs on the judge's bench. Within 5 minutes, Lily had sent the photo to 8 different group chats. The judge paused when she read one message. One less person stealing my spring break. She looked at my mother with clear disappointment. Mrs. Turner, she said sharply, in 28 years on this bench, I have never heard a parent speak about their child this way, especially while that child was fighting for her life. Temporary full custody is transferred to John Marshall, effective immediately. Will reconvene for the permanent hearing. Her gavel strike echoed across the marble room. 3 days later, Rebecca was dismissed from her job at the South Carolina State Credit Union. Federal funding required a background check, and medical neglect of a minor resulted in automatic disqualification. She was escorted out with a cardboard box. That same week, Lily's full-ride academic scholarship to the College of Charleston was revoked. The admissions board cited behavior inconsistent with the school's values. Even her private high school, which once praised her, began whispering behind her back. Within a month, the James Island home went into foreclosure. Because the deed listed only Ethan's name, he transferred everything to protect his assets. Rebecca and Lily moved into a 2-bedroom apartment near Savannah Highway with peeling paint and a broken elevator. Lily lost her car. Rebecca took a night shift job at a grocery store stocking shelves to cover rent. During this time, I started formal therapy. Twice weekly, a van picked me up for outpatient physical rehabilitation at MUSC. I relearned how to climb stairs, balance on a Bosu ball, and trust my legs again. Grandpa carried me to the car each time and waited in the lobby, reading the same 3 fishing magazines until I came out exhausted and shaking. I also met with Dr. Rivera, a trauma therapist. Every Thursday, in a small lavender-scented office, we talked about nightmares, anger, and the moment I realized I never wanted to hear my mother's voice again. Grandpa waited in the truck with the windows down and the country station low, never complaining about the heat. On afternoons when my hip pain flared, I sat on the back deck feeding pieces of bread to the German Shepherd. Grandpa and I watched the tide recede, each holding a glass of sweet tea. He never tried to fix my anger. He simply let me feel it. By the end of summer, I exchanged my crutches for a cane and eventually didn't need even that. I still had a slight limp, but doctors said it would mostly fade by the time I turned 18. One evening, I walked all the way to the end of Folly Pier and back without stopping. Even though the sun hadn't set yet, Grandpa met me halfway with a lantern and a blanket. We took off our shoes and sat on the sand, letting the waves reach our feet. I rested my head on his shoulder and said, "Thank you for staying." He kissed the top of my head. "Nowhere else I'd rather be, baby girl." 8 months after the accident, the final trial day arrived. I entered the courtroom without a limp, crutches, or a cane. My head was held high, though the scar on my forehead was still pink. Grandpa sat directly behind me in his Sunday suit, the same one he wore to my dad's funeral. Rebecca looked smaller than I remembered, her hair pulled back tightly and a tissue in her hand. Lily sat beside her with her arms crossed so hard her knuckles turned white. Donovan called me to the stand first. I took the oath and met the judge's eyes. "Tell the court how it felt," he said, "knowing your mother refused to come when you were dying." The room waited. It felt like the last part of me that believed I mattered disappeared on that table, I said. My voice stayed steady. One sentence told me I was disposable. The same woman who read me bedtime stories was the one who said it. I explained what it felt like waking up and seeing Grandpa's name listed as my guardian. I shared how I started sleeping to the sound of the ocean instead of wondering every night why I wasn't enough. I never looked over at Rebecca. Her attorney tried to paint her as anxious, overwhelmed, and a victim of her circumstances. He listed her divorce, foreclosure, and losing her job. When he finished, the judge asked if I had anything else to say. "Yes, Your Honor," I replied. "I don't want her money. I don't want her apologies. I just want this to be over." The judge didn't take long. After 25 minutes, she returned. Permanent termination of parental rights for Rebecca Turner, effective immediately. Civil judgment in favor of the plaintiff and the hospital, $500,000. The James Island property will be sold at auction to satisfy the lien. Full legal adoption is granted to Mr. John Marshall. This case is closed. Her gavel hit sharply. Reporters shouted questions in the hallway, but I ignored them, grabbed Grandpa's arm, and walked into the October sunlight. 4 weeks later, the large white house was padlocked by the bank. A moving truck took the few things Rebecca and Lily kept. They loaded an old car and drove north on I-45 to a cheaper place where no one knew them. I never asked where. The adoption papers arrived in the mail that same month. I cried more signing Maya Marshall for the first time than I did waking up from the coma. Grandpa framed the certificate and placed it beside my dad's old service photo above the fireplace. 12 minutes from Folly Beach, I started my final year at an alternative school. No one knew my story unless I shared it. The classes were small, and the teachers truly cared. I got early decision into the College of Charleston, close enough to come home every night if I wanted, and made the honor roll every quarter. Graduation day was warm and windy. My pale blue cap and gown matched the color of my bedroom walls, the ones Grandpa painted. By then, everyone in my senior class knew who had stood by me. When my name was called, the whole class rose cheering. Grandpa waited at the bottom of the stairs in his dress uniform, medals polished, eyes bright. I ran to him, wrapped my arms around his neck, and he lifted me like I weighed nothing. That Easter Sunday was 6 years ago. Now I'm 21, working as a family trauma counselor at a nonprofit in Mount Pleasant. My psychology degree hangs on the wall. Teenagers who believe no one will ever choose them sit across from me every day. And I get to tell them they're wrong, because someone chose me when the people who were supposed to love me the most didn't. Last month, Grandpa turned 77. He still mows his own lawn, cooks the best shrimp and grits in the state, and catches more fish than any charter captain on the island. The house on stilts is still full, creaky coffee maker, singing porch swing and wind chimes. My old room is still light blue. We never changed his tackle room back into a bedroom. Most nights, we eat dinner on the deck and watch dolphins chase mullet in the surf. He calls me baby girl at least once a day, usually as he hands me a glass of sweet tea, and I still call him Grandpa. Nothing else feels right. 4 years ago, Rebecca and Lily left South Carolina for good. Last I heard, they were renting a trailer under new last names somewhere in Georgia. I never looked for them, and they never reached out. The quiet remains peaceful. People ask if I'm angry. I'm not. Anger takes energy I'd rather use for living. Some ask about forgiveness. I don't have the right to forgive them. They have the responsibility to earn it, and they never have. I'm simply done. What I do feel is gratitude, deep, surprising gratitude, for the man who spent 20 nights in a vinyl chair, for the retired chief who never missed a counseling appointment, for the grandfather who made his heart a safe place and his house a home. Blood alone doesn't define family. When your blood runs cold on an operating table, the people who stay are the ones who count. Family are those who hold your hand, sign the papers, and never make you feel like a burden. If you're watching this and feel alone, try again. Those people exist. They might be a neighbor who never leaves, a friend, a teacher, or someone unexpected. And when you find them, hold on. True family isn't formed by biology. It's chosen, especially on the days when choosing you requires everything. That is the only truth I know. That's the end of my story.